with no point of reference. You spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of the light. Spoke to the dark, fleshed out the wonder. Your voice, come on, lift it loud. So will I can if creation sings your praises, so will I. And science, they follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, all the high and rebellion creatures catch their breath. They're evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I can see your heart in everything you say. Every pain is dark, it's a clearness of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. Come on, let's give him praise for this morning, 9 o'clock. Lift up his name, come on. Oh, let's make his name known this morning. If the stars, your voice. If the stars, the mountains, if the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. Everything, for if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. Oh, if the wind goes where you sing, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praises still falls short, then we'll sing in 100 billion times. Of salvation, oh, you chased down my heart from all of my failure and pride. We got this music. On a the light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. But we know the story doesn't end there, amen? Come on. And as you, oh, 100 billion failures, oh, they disappear. Lord, when you lost your life, so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've done. Let's go. do it again 100 billion times. But what measure could amount to your desire? You're the one who never leaves the one behind. Oh, come on and give him praise today.
Hey guys, Michael J. Crawford, the Anti-Trigger, but today Rational Roundtable. Good to see you all, and happy Sunday morning after the stupid time change. I gotta say, I hate daylight savings. I'm exhausted because since I work late on Saturday and I get up early on Sunday, losing that hour is huge for me. And you know, I just can't stand it. I really wish that practice would go away, or I wish that businesses that would push everything back an hour on that week. But yeah, it's rough. Anyway, Thomas was first in the house. Good to see you, my friend. Number one sci-fi says hello, Rational Roundtable, and everyone else. My beautiful bride puts a heart in the chat. Commander Strand says hello, everyone. Alexander's fifth, but says third, and then says fourth, because Alexander is not particularly strong in math. Carlos says hi, hope everyone is well. Alexander says hello, guys. Thomas says God save our queen. Number one sci-fi says hello, Mrs. Anti-Checker. God bless you, your family, and everyone else. You got that in the right order there. Mrs. Anti-Checker should always come first. Kronos says happy daylight savings. I hate daylight savings. Aberjam says Rational Roundtable. Greetings, brother. May the Lord keep the Kurogan army from your door this day. Thank you. No sign of the Kurogans. Of course, look at this beautiful sunrise or sunset or whatever it is with this lovely picture. Kurogans couldn't stand to be in the sight of such beauty. They prefer to be around bird of prey. Thomas says, Kronos, there's nothing happy about daylight savings. It needs to end. I tend to agree with you, Thomas. It's an antiquated practice. It really doesn't serve any practical purpose in the 21st century. I'm sorry, can we just get a president of the United States that has the balls to, A, legalize certain substances that should have been legalized a long time ago, and B, get rid of daylight savings time? Yeah, that would be nice. Man. Thomas says, I lost an hour of video game playing because of daylight savings. Yeah, I didn't get to play anything last night. You guys are having some fun playing Counter-Strike. Makes me wish that my schedule was a little more normal. Chrono says, losing an hour makes me something. Okay. Aberjam says, you get it back in the fall. Aberjam, always the optimist. I mean, Aberjam, the one person who has been trapped in a Kurogan prison for all these months, being forced to make censored versions of his songs, and yet he can see the positive. We could all learn a thing or two from Aberjam. But Thomas is saying that's too far away. And Carlos says, go crazy, and then Kronos says, don't mind if I do. Kind of a weird thing. Captain Trek says, hello, how you doing, Captain Trek? I don't like daylight savings time. I don't think we should mess around with time. I agree. I think it's pointless. Mrs. Anti-Checker says, good morning to everyone. Number one sci-fi says, they have passed laws in numerous states to stay on daylight savings time, but Congress still has it stalled. Yeah, I think that the president just needs to write a frickin' executive order saying, you know what? Screw it. We don't need this anymore. Goodbye. That should be it. Kronos says, actually, it's afternoon now. Not for me. It is 11:26 for me right now. Darren says, good morning. How you doing, Darren? And I have not, man, I'm so far behind. That's one of the reasons this is going to be a relatively short stream. I got to get some stuff done. Darren, do you have a video for tomorrow? I don't even know if you had something specific, because we had that one that was like O'Brien Part 2 that needs to be edited down. But I didn't know if you had another one specifically for tomorrow, and I haven't had a chance to look, and so tell me, because I got, yeah. Darren says, I only like daylight savings in the fall. Yeah, that's the only time it's any good. Schromer says, I prefer if they kept the daylight savings, an extra hour of light in the summer evenings and winter. It would not be bright until after 10 a.m., so I want them to keep it. I don't care what, you know what, here's the thing, Schromer. If you don't get an extra hour of daylight, you're just up an hour, you just go to bed an hour earlier. Number one sci-fi says, Darren Wagner, daylight savings is an abomination and needs to be abolished. I agree. Jeff Franklin says, greetings. Hey, Jeff, good to see you, my friend. And Schromer says, hail Kuroga and free Auntie. Auntie is perfectly free, and Kuroga needs to burn in flames. That's probably why I work nights. Hail Kuroga, says Carly. See, well, no, it's because you're a Kurogan. Only Kurogans can enjoy the suffering that comes from daylight savings. All you people complaining about daylight savings time make me sick. It's an hour. You don't just get off a plane from Australia. It's an hour. Suck it up. No, I hate it. And I get it. It depends on, like, for some people it's no big deal. For other people it's huge. You know, maybe for me, I think part of the reason I find it so annoying is because I'm not one of those people that gets depressed when the sun's not out, and I don't get giddy when the sun is out. So I don't care about how many hours of daylight we have during the day. That being said, I also, since I've always worked odd shifts, I've tended to work on Saturday nights or Sunday mornings, and because of that, the daylight savings always makes that weekend particularly rough. There was actually one company I worked for many years where I worked a graveyard shift Saturday night, and on the fall was even worse, because in the fall we would have to work an extra hour of our shift because the morning shift that came in to relieve us didn't get, they came in at the regularly scheduled time, so we were stuck there for an hour longer than every other day. But during the spring, we didn't get to go home an hour early. No, we had to stay an extra hour to make up for the fact that our shift was only 7 hours instead of 8. So yeah, that was a raw deal. Aberjam says, we could all learn a thing or two from Aberjam. I'd like that in writing, please. Well, you just put it in writing, so you got it. Jeff says, good afternoon to Aberjam. I'm guessing it's afternoon. Yeah, Aberjam is in the UK, so yes. Ashar, to assume you would use O'Brien to the Wounded this week. All right, I'm just concerned about it getting a copyright hit. I mean, if it does, it's not the biggest deal in the world, because it'll just get a content ID match. It won't, get the channel in trouble or anything, but it just may limit how many people will see it and stuff. So just so you're aware of that. That's all. Number one sci-fi says, tomorrow is usually the most called out sick Monday besides the Monday after the Super Bowl. Is it? I did not know that, but I would not be surprised. Aberjam says, my mother-in-law put her clock back instead of forward and was 2 hours late getting up for church. I should laugh at that. It's kind of funny. I'll tell you, we go to the earlier service on Sunday mornings, and attendance was down like quite a bit. It was funny because Mrs. Anchecker, when we were on our way to church, there's this one spot I like to sit in. It's in the second row. In the second row in the center section on the right side. That's what the specific seat that I like. And I like sitting on the last seat on the right, because that way my leg can be in the aisle and stretched out a little bit. And I like being towards the front, because if there's a bunch of heads in front of me, I tend to get distracted looking around at all the weird people. And second row is better than the front row, because second row you have a chair in front of you that when I get up, because I actually, have to lift myself out of the chair, I have that chair there to help me. So that's the spot I like to sit in. And of course we're pulling in, and we're running a little later than usual, not because of the daylight savings, but just because I was taking too long getting ready this morning. And Mrs. Anchecker says, we'll make it on time, and since you got that handicap placard, you'll get your parking space, but you're probably not going to get your seat. And we get in there's nobody there because everybody was late. So yeah. Thomas says, at least 99% of my stuff changes the time by itself. That's true, Tom. And, the funny thing is, like, when I was a kid, we didn't have anything that would automatically change the time. You would have to change your watch, your alarm clock, any clocks in the house, everything. You would have to run around and adjust the time. And so, yes, that sucks. Not Ryan Johnson is lying and saying that Aberjam is an anti-checkers dungeon, which has been made to look like a Kurogan prison. Everybody knows that's a lie. It's all right. And Stromer says, fake news, Thomas. Aberjam is clearly doing it because he wants to, not just because Bird of Prey has him duct taped upside down in the dungeon. I think that the duct taped upside down in the dungeon has more to do with it than his desires. Carlos says there's not weird people, just strangers. Oh wait, scratch that. Just looked in the mirror. Wow. Jeff says, I woke up at 7 a.m. this morning and thought it was earlier because it looked so dark outside. It took me a minute or two to realize why. Yeah. Honestly, for me, when I woke up, I didn't think about it. I just thought, man, I really could have used that extra hour of sleep. That's honestly all I could think. And I was just groggy. I still am. Not Ryan Johnson says, I read it on the internet, so it must be true. Well, that's your biggest problem. You see, you must be younger than me because you believe things that you read on the internet. So, yeah. I think that if God had intended for there to be daylight savings time, then sundials would go back an hour and spring forward an hour, Sorry, daylight savings time is a complete waste of time. Quite literally, actually. Sharon says, Kat Jackie is studying international airline studies. She needs to do a project on cabin crew. I don't know what the conversation was about, but that sounds interesting. I didn't know you could study international airline studies. Never heard of such a thing. Yosef says 3 weeks before we switch. Well, yeah, so that means we're an hour closer together now for the next 3 weeks, or an hour further apart. I don't know. I get confused. Darren says, you'll probably have to whittle the Apocalypse Now and First Blood clips in the O'Brien video. Yeah, you see, you're making me... I have time for that, Darren. You jerk. You know I got to work like 8 hours today, and I'm supposed to do a live stream tonight, and I only got a couple of hours before I start work. So when do you expect me to whittle down your video for you? Jerk. Stromer is... Thomas says, Stromer breaking just admitted Bird of Prey is Aberjam duct taped upside down. Yes, he did. He clearly stated that, but, yeah. 1634 in the UK. Yeah, that's the year, not the time. Not Ryan John says, I look at the switch on the positive note, gives me 1 hour closer to drinking coffee. Well, that's a positive way to look at it. Yosef says, so what is the time? For me, as of right now, it is 11:35 a.m. In the central time zone in the United States. Arjun says, Romans 9 talks about God making some vessels for wrath and some for damnation. How do we disprove the Calvinists on this one? Well, first of all, you're taking it, because here's the problem, and actually the way you presented that is exactly why I have a problem with some of these doctrines. Because what is the larger context of that? Simply saying that, well, Romans 9 says, and then throwing that specific thing out there, well, that's not what Romans is about, right? That's not what and that's actually a common problem. This is why I prefer expository teaching of the Bible, which is what we do at our church, where rather than taking a verse here and a verse here and a verse here and constructing a picture, that is doing that. Actually, in my humble opinion, is editing the Bible in order to create a a narrative that fits the message you're trying to convey. And doing that, you could make it so that the Bible seems like it's pro-slavery, that it's pro-spouse abuse, but you could also make the Bible seem like it's anti-slavery and pro-woman, right? And like, you can do all sorts of stuff to manipulate the Bible to be whatever your agenda is when you pick and choose verses. If you use expository teaching, as our church does, where you start at the beginning of a book of the Bible and you go through that entire book, it really brings some of these things into light. So when you say, well, in Romans 9 it mentions, and then you say two things that it mentions specifically, that's not Romans 9. I hope that makes sense. I'm not trying to pick on you, Aberjam, because I know that you're being your question is not intended to be like entrapment or anything like that. You're not Luke. Yes, I see you there, Luke. But the problem is that a lot of people will use that type of logical thinking. And what you need to do is read the book of Romans, not just, one thing about a vessel for wrath and others for damnation, and what specifically was he talking about, what is the larger context of it. Don't just mess up the alignment of the video and the image like you did last time, Piker. Wow. Well, maybe if you did it for me, Darren, that wouldn't be a problem. Sherman says, my wife went back to college. International Airline Studies is one of the courses that they offered the tourism department. That's cool. Luke Fauvark is my favorite Frenchman, says it's 5:36 p.m. here. I hope you are doing well, my friend. Rambling Canuck is in the house. How's my pain brother doing? Good to see you. Yosef says, so 6 hour difference, so we are closer. So yeah, so during these 3 weeks, we're 1 hour closer together. And Thomas says, Rome shall rise again. I kind of hope not. Shermer says, it has always been a problem for people to pick and choose from the Bible. It was even highlighted in the book of Acts and the reason for the first council of Jerusalem. Yeah, I know. That's the funny thing is that, yes, it has been a problem in biblical teaching and doctrinal teaching for literally thousands of years. And it's something that's one of the reasons I love the church that I go to. And that I brag about the Experience Community Church, because we don't do that, and there are some things in the Bible that by modern sensibilities are considered distasteful, right? There are things in the Bible that by modern sensibilities goes against the modern liberal mindset, right? And I can understand that, and I understand we can have those discussions, but we need to be frank and honest about it, as opposed to trying to dance around certain issues, and also to try and manipulate the Bible into meaning something it doesn't. Average says, I could post a little chapter, but it would take a while, lol. It spends a lot of time explaining that we cannot resist the will of God. Right. But here's the thing, and I get it, like when I talk to Calvinists on the free will issue, and you look at the overall picture of what the Bible presents as far as free will. Does it seem, based on what the Bible says, that we do have free will? Absolutely. Does it seem, based on what the Bible says, that we don't have free will? Sometimes, yeah. So how do you reconcile that? Well, I look at it as, and I think it's actually fairly straightforward, actually, is that if you examine it realistically, we have free will, except for when God removes it, when God has something specific that he needs to have you do. The most blatant example of that is in Exodus, where it shows God hardening Pharaoh's heart. In that particular story, of course, Pharaoh had free will, but God wanted to make sure, for whatever reason, you can argue about God's motives. I'm not God, so I'm not going to explain what God's motives are, because I don't know. But for whatever reason, God wanted the events of the plagues on Egypt to go down the way they did. So in order to ensure that, he removed Pharaoh's free will, and basically hardened his heart was the term used in Exodus in order to make sure that he would not release the Israelites. Now, some people would argue that makes God cruel. Some people would argue that makes God evil. Whatever. But here's the thing. If it's factual, whether or not there are implications of how you putting a moral judgment on God are irrelevant. What matters is it factual? And so and I understand, some people want to, and this is the real problem. People want to consider themselves above God. Can't do that, right? Assuming for a minute God exists. Now, I understand if you are an atheist, that you would reject the premise that God exists in the first place, and therefore you would consider your moral authority to be the ultimate moral authority in the universe. I don't. And so if you want to suggest that what God does is evil because you personally disagree with it, to me that is you putting yourself above God. And since I believe God exists, I do not believe for one heartbeat that any human being has a better moral authority than God himself. Aberjam says, I agree with you. Romans 9, however, presents possibly the largest challenge to anti-Calvinists, though it is not insurmountable. Well, here's the problem with Calvinists, and this is actually a problem with many people who adhere to some kind of dogmatic doctrine, whether it's Calvinism or a million other doctrines out there. It's that they remember we were talking about picking and choosing your verse here, your verse there, your verse here, and you put together whatever doctrine. And then you say, this is absolute fact. Not what the Bible says, but your doctrine, which is a construction that you put together based on a few things. Now, when the Calvinists start talking about free will, and they show, well, we have this verse and this verse and this verse and this verse that clearly indicate no free will, therefore 100% no free will. Well, all you added to it was the 100% part, but that adds a ton of meaning to it. And you have to be very, very careful about adding something to what's already there. And so, and that's where I think a lot of the problem comes in, is that what we want to do is construct a vision that is simpler, less nuanced, and quite frankly, more palatable in the modern age. J.K. Chesterton wrote a brilliant piece about the arrogance of some Christians. They set themselves in the high mountains and look down on others, and in so they're turning their backs on God. Well, and what's even worse is some people will set themselves high on the mountain and think that they're looking down on God. That's what really bugs me. Carlos says, could the Bible be updated to fit in and explain in a more modern way? Sure. As long as you're not changing the meaning of anything, you could absolutely do an updated, if you will, version of the Bible. And when I say updated, I don't mean that you change the actual stories of anything, but maybe you put it into a context that's easier for someone in the modern world to understand. For example, when we talk about the Good Samaritan, the biggest problem with the story of the Good Samaritan is that 99.9% of people, when they hear the term Samaritan, they think of a person who is basically a good person, right? We always think of, in many states in the United States have Samaritan laws, basically alleviating one from responsibility if you are simply attempting to help someone. Why is it called a Samaritan law? Because you're trying to help someone in need, which is what the Good Samaritan did. So we tend to think of Samaritans as people running around helping people in need. If you were to rewrite the Good Samaritan story today, it would be called something like the Good Nazi. That's the thing, is that the Jews hated the Samaritans, which was the whole point of that story. But in the modern vernacular, it's lost because in the modern era, we don't have any real emotional, visceral connection to the term Samaritan other than to think that, oh, that's a good person that helps people. And Luke says, isn't cherry picking the whole problem of modern Christianity, though? As you said, some things in the Bible are immoral by modern human standards, yet Christ offered both covenants. Well, first of all, is cherry picking the whole problem of modern Christianity? No. That's a gross oversimplification. I mean, maybe you think it's a problem because you think the Bible is immoral. I don't think the Bible is immoral. Like, and kind of how you phrase it, by modern human standards. Well, I don't put man above God. And so if God says X is moral, man says X is immoral, I go with God. Sorry. That's and vice versa. If God says X is immoral and man says it's moral, I go with God. Now, that's, however, and one thing that's important to understand is, of course, that we are also called as Christians to not judge non-Christians, which means we don't point the finger. Like, it would be completely inappropriate for me, Luke, and I don't know, I don't know anything about your, like, what relationships you may be in, but let's say, for the sake of argument, you're gay, and I point the finger at you and I say, you're going to hell because you're gay, right? That is completely antithetical to what Christ teaches. You're not a Christian, and the Bible clearly states that I am not to hold you to Christian accountability unless you're a Christian. So yeah, that's a whole, and that's something that unfortunately a lot of Christians leave out. Now, is cherry picking a serious problem? Absolutely. It is a serious problem, and that's probably part of the reason. It's a huge part of the reason that there have been so many splits in the church over the centuries. And in fact, that's that's why the Catholic Church was split off from in the first place, because the Catholic Church was doing that. And I know a lot of Catholics don't want to hear me say that, so I'll shut up. Bird of Praise says, Kapla! In fact, I have updated the Bible, and the Korogan Bible has been printed. Oh, I can't wait to hear that one. Luke says, besides the parts Christ specifically adjusted, he clearly states that followers are to be following both covenants. In that sense, you're right. You're not supposed to judge God. Well, first of all, Christ didn't adjust things. If you look at what Christ was basically doing, was clarifying certain issues, and there were some things that were no longer required, such as some of the Levitican law when it comes to things like food and stuff like that. The most contemporary version of the New Testament is called The Message and is written like a novel. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the paraphrasing Bibles. I would rather see simply a translation that's not a paraphrase translation, but simply updated the terminology. And chose to actually translate terms that have never been properly translated, such as the term baptism. I understand why the term baptism was not translated, but I think that it's kind of, that's interesting in and of itself, and that there's political motivation there. Bird of Praise says, good morning, sorry I'm late. That's all right, Bird. We understand that, in Koroga, you guys always forget to change your alarms. Isn't the NIV version really more easy to follow than King James Version? Well, depends on who you are, but yes, generally. If you're handing a Bible to, there's hundreds of translations. The Holman Christian Bible is the one that I tend to prefer, but I do like the NIV. I like the New King James, but reading the classic King James, I will tell you, there are some verses in the Bible that sound so beautiful and poetic in the classic King James that just don't have the right ring to it when it's not in the King James. For example, everybody has heard, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? It's a beautiful image. It evokes a very powerful image. It makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. And then you read a modern translation and it says, and though I walk through the dangerous valley, and it's like, it doesn't sound that great, so I get it. There's the poetry of the King James Version is beautiful, but it's also very difficult to follow at times. Sisso Prey's here. We're watching Homeland. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Say hi to Sisso Prey. I hope she's doing well. Point is, modern Christians do judge the God of the Bible, and that is precisely what atheists point out when they say your God is evil, so why follow him? Christians do judge the God of the Bible. I guess you've lost me on that one. I generally don't point the finger at God and say you're wrong about this. Now, I will say that some Christians ignore parts of the Bible, and in doing so, you could argue are casting judgment on whether or not that thing is good or bad or something like that. So if that's what you mean, yeah, I can kind of see. But when you say modern Christians do it, that's kind of a bit more than I think that what you meant. And Average, I did not. You're right. I did miss your comments. I don't know how I did that. So let me go back. And it says, regards Pharaoh had hardened his own heart before God got to it. When God hardened it, the Hebrew used actually means strengthened or emboldened when Pharaoh began losing resolve. Yes. Well, yeah, Pharaoh was already a bad dude. But yes, you're absolutely right. And then he also says the most contemporary version of the New Testament is called The Message. I read that one. And while the Message is not the worst biblical paraphrase ever, don't get me wrong, I just don't, I prefer sticking to the way that it's put together in the actual original. And unfortunately, I wish we had the actual original manuscripts, but, that's just not a thing. And Bird of Prey sending me a picture of Cinnabon's bunny with a horn on it. Because, why not? And where was I? I think a lot of people have a problem with understanding something that doesn't quite fit in with our modern day life, like giving away a lamb. Exactly, that's the problem. And things like when it says, oh, and for 13 shekels, or this is 47 cubits long, and stuff like that. Let's update that, right? It's not changing the word of God to translate shekels to dollars, right? That's not, it just makes it make more sense to people. Because right now when somebody says, oh, they broke that vase and it was worth 30 denarius, and you're like, what the heck does that mean? So, so that's something that does need to be updated in my opinion. Luke says, hence the cherry picking, and hence why atheists who did read the Bible just like you point out this very problem to modern Christians. They don't judge God. Christians do. Actually, I've never heard a Christian say God is evil. I've heard lots of atheists say that. So I'm not sure what you mean, Luke, because you seem, honestly, if you're saying that Christians are judging God and atheists aren't, I dare say you're wrong. I mean, granted, atheists don't believe God exists, but they are judging the caricature of God as portrayed in the Bible as evil. Listen to Christopher Hitchens when, he said that all the time. So does Richard Dawkins still does, right? What is it Dawkins is famous for saying? That God is like the most evil and character that he's ever seen in all of fiction. If that ain't judging God, I don't know what is. But I understand that if you think it's fictional, therefore you're not really judging, well, now you're just playing games of, semantics, which is beneath you, quite frankly. What atheists want is for Christians to at least remain rational and consistent. If they want to believe and follow the Bible, they should act like it. I agree. And unfortunately, since Christianity is a huge swath of the population, it's inconsistent, just like any swath of the population would be. Schroeder says, I'm okay with you raising issues with the Catholic Church. Catholics should be able to answer and give reasons for why we do what we do and believe what we believe. Fair enough, Schroeder. I just don't want you to think I'm picking on the Catholics, because you know what? Almost every church is guilty of it. Let's see. If things were no longer required, it was an adjustment to the new context. Come on, we're not disagreeing. Well, no. Like I said, but here's the thing, but the way you phrased it, I guess, sounded off to me. Like Jesus was just showing up and say, "Let's tweak this over here and let's tweak this over here." No, he had a clear cut. This is what is, these are the laws that are important, and he's stated and restated that several times throughout the New Testament. And these are the things that are no longer binding. And most of those he gave a specific reason as to why. Vile says alcohol is greater than pies. I guess it depends on the context. Darren says, personally use the King James for Old Testament study with Strong's Concordance handy and the NAS for the New Testament. The King James, is, like I said, it's beautiful, but yeah, it can be hard to follow for just reading. And Aberjam, I apologize for missing your comments, but I did go back and catch them because you were diligent about pointing that out to me. Piano Dean says, hey, and welcome, Piano Dean. Ever notice how people love to quote, "He who is without sin cast the first stone," then always leave out the second part where Jesus says, "Go and sin no more"? Well, of course. Because that one is like, because here's the thing, people like to, and part of the cherry picking problem is like, for example, when Paul says all things are permissible, but then they leave out the "but not all things are beneficial," right? They want to actually, have permission to basically do whatever hedonistic thing they want to do without repercussion, and then that way they can just go and party. Matthew says, "Oh, happy day. Hello, Mike. Hey, Matthew. Good to see you, my friend. Pharaoh was a bad dude. MJC. Yes, Pharaoh was indeed a bad dude." And there's Bird posted the picture to Strawberry, the bunny corn. Yes, that is Cinnabon Bunny's rabbit done up as a bunny corn because Karogans want to torture bunnies and attach horns to them. Do you think that we might find the original books, or do you think that the Vatican has them lost in the vaults? Honestly, from something that old, it would be highly, highly unlikely that the original books are still intact. Which is unfortunate, but just a fact of the nature of the universe. Things break down over time. And we're talking about with the Old Testament, books that are over 5,000 years old, those are rare finds indeed. And so, will we ever find the original? It's not likely. But is it possible? Sure. But am I going to hold my breath? No. Aberdam says, "I'm not a fan of the message myself. Give me the ESV or the HSCB any day, but it's there for those who want it." Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't mind seeing something like the Holman Standard, but update some of the terminology so that instead of shekels or pieces of silver, instead of cubits and all that, update the terminology. Make it easier for people to understand. Vile Mike says, "How do you feel about apologists and pastors, preachers using the COVID-19 hype to say things like it's because of sinners like atheists and gays?" The COVID-19 to using the you're talking about the virus saying it's because of sinners and atheists and gays. I would point out that those people clearly have not read their Bible. That's all I would say is I think that people that try to say, like, every time some kind of disaster hits, some idiot preacher or whatever is going to be out there saying that it's because God said, or because these people are sinners, therefore God is therefore God is punishing the, like I remember the big tsunami, people was punishing the people about Asia because they're Buddhists, people are punishing California because they're a bunch of gays and stuff like that, right? These people need to shut up because they do not understand basic theology if they genuinely believe that. And if they don't genuinely believe it, then they're hypocrites. A cube is the length from the elbow to the fingertips, right? Something like that. A cubit, yes. I believe so. But you know what? That's the problem. It's like, if I say something is 47 cubits, compared to, I say, it's 100 feet, you know, it's a lot easier. Even if you're European and you're used to the metric system, if I say 100 feet, it's a lot easier for you to understand than 100 cubits. Luke says, yes, that's what I mean. Those Christians are not changing their morals to follow God's standards. They're changing God's standard to suit their morals. Yeah, I'll agree with you on that, Luke. But my point is, make sure you always put a qualifier on there. That time you said these Christians, before you just said Christians. And I understand you didn't do that on purpose, and I know you're a good guy. You're not applying that to the Christians in this chat or to myself, but there are plenty of Christian hypocrites out there. But here's the thing, and this is where those of us that I consider genuine Christians, right? People that genuinely care about following Christ's teachings and studying the Bible and understanding it, we need to be more active in calling this crap out, right? When a preacher is out there saying that the coronavirus is God's way of punishing, people because of our sinful ways, we need to tell them, you know what, you need to shut up. And so if we have a platform to speak from, we need to say it. I disagree. The Bible money should be updated to modern money, but should be how long it would take to earn money, 1 day's wage. Well, there are some verses that actually do that, and so, which is okay. But the problem is, and that would be, I guess, a more universal system. Because obviously, if you said $150, to some people that's a day's wage, to other people that's an hour's wage. So I can get that. But yeah, if you update the terminology to at least that extent, Captain Trek, I think we would be it would be easier for people to follow. Take away, just remove the word shekel and put, an hour's wage or a day's wage or something like that, so that it would be easier for people to follow. And let's see. Luke says, I am not saying God is evil since I don't believe he even exists. I'm observing cherry pickers and understanding that they're subconsciously more morally judging God's character. Well, Luke, I understand you're not saying that right now, but I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at all our prior conversations. Are you saying you've never said that you think that what God or what the Bible says is immoral? Because I'm pretty sure you have. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you have. But and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to pick on you. I'm just saying that but a lot of atheists do that because they put their own moral standards and superimpose that on the Bible, which is only the natural thing to do. I just disagree with it. I never felt you were picking on the Catholic Church. We have more members than all other 44,000 plus Christian denominations put together, so it's no issue we were mentioned more. Fair enough. Darren says, your new nickname is MJ? No. No. Well, it's your fault. I'm limited in character number, and I have to rational roundtable at the beginning. I'm sorry, Luke. I know it's a pain. I can't change the name of the channel, though. I suppose I could. This channel's relatively small. I could change this channel to like RRT or something. What is evil is looking up and killing hundreds and cutting off the meat to be eaten. Evil or just wait. What is evil? Is locking up and killing hundreds and cutting off the meat to be eaten evil or just farming? Does the meaning change with context? Well, Carlo, first of all, locking up and killing hundreds and cutting off the meat, is that evil? Well, you're leaving out vital bits of information. Are we talking about animals like cows? Are we talking about people? That would make a big difference. The biblical text often works like math, so the differences between translations becomes important as soon as you want to dig a little deeper. The meaning of symbols, variables is already defined elsewhere, but you can't get it. The stuff is translated with different words all the time. So for any Bible study, you should choose a literal translation. It doesn't really matter if modern or not. Well, I do prefer literal translations, Cuba. I truly do. And I also believe wholeheartedly that, especially for personal Bible study, that you should be using a concordance and an exhaustive concordance And you should be doing studies based on that exhaustive concordance. And then you should also have a Greek and Hebrew lexicon if available, so that you can look at what the actual terminology is, what it truly means, as opposed to just taking the translation at face value. What about the female pharaohs? Are they bad? I don't know. Were there female pharaohs? Not an expert on that one. Steve says, Happy Lord's Day to all, unless this sort of thing is not your bag, baby. Hey, Steve, good to see you. Luke says, obviously I can't nuance my sentences in such short messages, a common issue with social media. I agree. That is a problem with social media, and it's just the nature of the beast. Unfortunately, we live in an era where 144 characters is like a major speech nowadays, right? That's why I freaking get I'm so sick of freaking Twitter, and these idiots on Twitter that this I'm not gonna even. I'm gonna leave that one alone. Yo says Dawkins says those things about the God of the Old Testament based on how he treated his creation, the humanity. Please don't block me; those are not my words. First of all, Yosef, why would I block you? I consider you a friend. And second of all, yes, Dawkins does say those things about the God of the Old Testament. And you're just confirming what I said, so why would I block you for that unless you're just being silly? Carlos says, that's what I meant about updating, not just a translation to modern languages. Yeah, I got you. Christ-likeness is the key to good and effective New Testament-style evangelism. I agree. Go ye into the world and preach the good news. The good news is Christ, amen, grace, amen. Schromer says, the Good News Bible updates some terminology such as switching cubits for kilometers, etc. It's not great for Bible study, but good for passing on the basic message to modern people. Well, and that's the thing. I think that somebody needs to take, and the problem is that, I really do think somebody needs to take the time to really get into making the modern lingo work in the Bible and still retain a literal translation. I think it's doable. It's just that nobody wants to, because the problem is people get all worked up over that. They think that, if you change cubits to feet, then all of a sudden you're a blasphemer. You've changed the word of God, right? Just like there are many people who consider themselves King James onlyists, right? That they say, the King James Bible is the only Bible because in this translation they left out the word God, and therefore they're trying to remove God from the Bible, even though they only left it out of like 3 verses in the entire Bible, and those 3 verses are actually more accurately translated in the more updated translation. That the word God was inserted into the King James, and when they retranslated, they didn't see the word put there, so they didn't put it in. I understand people, and that's the problem when you're talking about religion. People get rather fanatic about it. And the problem is they put their religion ahead of God. And that's a real problem. Luke says, I agree. Fundings are pointing the finger at everyone else is annoying and toxic for Christianity. It makes all the religions look bad for those who ignore their minority. Yes. Cuba says, replacing currencies by something else kills the meaning of some verses, like the Roman tax money. Not necessarily. If you translate because if you look at the tax money as a percentage, and the problem is a lot, and maybe what we really need more of is better written study Bibles to explain to people what or maybe even, I don't know how you would do it well, but like some way to explain to people how the taxation system worked back then and stuff, because unfortunately, and this is a real problem within Christianity, since it's so inconsistent, there's so many different denominations and so many different methodologies to practicing worship, that some preachers and pastors, like at the church I go to, Corey, our senior pastor, has a tendency when he gets to something like tax collection or fishing or whatever, and he'll take the time to say, okay, when we think of fishing, we think that you're just sitting on the lake and casting your lure in or whatever. Here's how it was 2,000 years ago. And so he would take the time to explain the cultural context before reading the actual scriptures, so that when they said fishing, you knew what they meant. If there's a separate animal heaven, I'd like to go there unless they allow bears. Well, if it's an animal heaven, Bunny, I'm pretty sure they'll allow bears. When the women touched Christ's robe and he felt power go out from him, does that imply he was not in full control of his power or that it was limited? No, I got the idea that it was really meant to show that her faith drew his power to her. And in the same token, and it's not necessarily magic superpowers all the time. In this case, it was her being healed, which is awesome. But for anybody, their faith in God can draw God's power into them. Their power to persevere or their power to endure can really be boosted by your level of faith. I don't think that, I think that Christ just noticed that, I don't think that Christ was like, oh, I've been drained, I must recharge my power ring. I don't think it was anything like that. I think it was just that Christ noticed. Dawkins calls God genocidal. I find that sadly hilarious. Yeah. Yes, change to RRT would make the character count easier. We tend to discuss complex topics here, and even a single additional word can make a point clearer. I agree, Vile. I'll probably... I'll try it and see, hopefully, because really all I do on this channel is live stream anyway, so it's not like it's going to make a huge difference if I change this channel name. There were many female pharaohs. Ever hear of Cleopatra? I've heard of Cleopatra, but I never heard her referred to as pharaoh. That's why I'm asking. I'm not an expert on Egyptology, so I don't know if there was such a thing as a female pharaoh. What you're remembering is me listening to some of God's acts and making the trivial comment that these acts are evil by human standards. To God's morals, they are justified if you believe. Well, I think they're justified if he exists. I think that, I honestly, Luke, I'm giving you some points here. That's the proper way to say it, is that if he exists, then God's moral standards are absolute. If he doesn't exist, then you're absolutely correct. But obviously that's where our fundamental difference of opinion is. Rambling Canuck says, what are your thoughts on churches that go heavy on the end times and use fear of what's coming to point out everything that's a sign that it's all coming to an end? Again, kind of the same thing as these preachers and pastors that like to preach that, the coronavirus is God's wrath. They need to shut up. Honestly. I don't mind talking about the end time stuff, but you don't sit there because here's the problem. People have been holding up signs saying the end is nigh for 2,000 years. And we don't know. And Christ even makes it painfully clear in Scripture that we do not know when the end will come. Even Christ himself stated that, at least in his human form, he did not know when the end will come. Only that it will. And here are some signs that the end is coming. However, the problem is that the world could end literally right now. Didn't. Okay, or it could end in 500 million years. We don't know. And the idea is that we should be prepared as if the world is going to spin on, but also prepared in case it ends now. See? People get fanatical when talking about religion. No, that seems hyperbolic. I can't see anyone get fanatical about this. Wait, someone is sending me a death threat on Facebook. Nice file. I am going to wrap it up here in just a few minutes, guys. I said this would be short, and it's mainly because I got to try to get some stuff set up for tomorrow and get some work done. And I got to go to work in less than 2 hours. And I also got to squeeze lunch in there somewhere. Oh, jeez. Wikipedia says there's 21 female pharaohs. Well, Wikipedia is always right, so there we go. Cuba says there was even a female leader of Israel. Well, no, I'm not debating that. As far as female leadership in Israel, yeah, that's well established. But I just didn't know if there was any females that held the title of pharaoh. That's a new one on me. What is the most ridiculous reason given by what denomination to break away from the other denomination? Honestly, I think one of the most ridiculous reasons that people give to say that you should be in our church, not their church, there's a couple of them. I mean, they use a Bible other than the King James. That's a big one. There's also, they don't believe in baptismal regeneration is a big one to me. Those are just ridiculous. I was going to post a live version of Nerds from this weekend. I will attempt to do so at work, but I screwed the words up. We'll try again soon. All right, Piano D. You know, my friend, you got to, and I don't know if it's possible with the place you work at. It would be so nice if you could get a better quality recording of your live shows, because they're incredible. But the problem is that I know it looks like you're recording on your phone that you like set on the piano. So you hear like the piano just blaring and you can barely hear you. I don't know if there's a way to fix that, but man, if you could, that would be awesome. Wesley says, greetings, I'm late. Well, just before I'm wrapping up, of course. Mr. Londell says, Queen Hop Ship Scoot was Egypt's first female pharaoh. Well, you learn something new every day, and I'll probably forget that by the time I read this comment. Remember back when AIDS was God's wrath and bird flu and SARS and Ebola? Well, bird flu is still, honestly, bird flu is God's wrath. I mean, he sits in that stupid bed and does those live streams that, oh, wait, never mind. Spin on, ha ha ha, yes. Little Nick Fury quote. Now that I'm picturing Jesus with a lantern ring through darkest valley and darkest night, no sin shall escape my eyes. You masturbating late at night. Oh, that's another one. The masturbating thing. Oh, all right. Well, I'm not going to even get into that. Are there levels of faith? I think that faith is just the act of relying on God. When people think about strength of faith, they're conflating it with faithfulness. How often we do see it. Well, faith is akin to trust. So let me ask you, are there levels of trust? Right? And I would dare say there are. Because you may trust your friend to, go pick up the movie tickets for the movie you're planning on seeing with your friend, but would you trust your friend with your brand new car that you just bought? Would you trust your friend with the keys to your house when you're going to be on vacation? Would you trust your friend to take care of your lonely wife when you're away for a month? You see, there are levels of trust. So I would take it the same way. Queen to Queens level 3. King to Queens level 1, I think. Steve says, I'm an honest Christian, or at least I try to be. And that is the important thing, honestly, is to try to be. I think that, and that's something that a lot of Christians also confuse. They don't understand. It's not about the victory. It's about the battle. It's about striving for that victory, because we are not perfect beings. We never will be. Yeah. Vile Mike says, I don't even trust Mrs. Vile with my car. Aberchan says, faithfulness is equivalent to trust. Faith is what allows God to work in us and through us. Yes, I agree. If you want to see for yourself that the end will take quite some time, then carefully read Matthew 24. The gospel must be preached to the whole world first. Did not happen yet. Well, and even that, though, is one of those things where, like, is there a country in the world where the gospel has not reached? Now, you could argue that there are individuals that the gospel has not reached. But, but the point of it, honestly, Cuba, is that we don't know. Like I said, could happen tomorrow, could happen in 500 billion years. But we should be prepared as if it's going to happen tomorrow. We should also be prepared for if it's going to happen in 500 billion years. And with that, I am going to wrap it up. I thought it was a good conversation. I'm sorry that I can't stay on too much longer. But I do have to try and get some stuff set up for tomorrow, or else there'll be no video tomorrow, and Darren will get mad at me. And I don't want to make Darren get mad at me because, you've seen his picture. He's crazy looking. I mean, do you really want that showing up at your doorstep going, no. So, if I'm able to, I will do a live stream tonight. I'm not going to promise that, because if I don't manage to get anything done during the day today, I'm going to have to do it after work tonight, and that'll cut into any possible streaming time. And so with that, guys, thank you all for being awesome. And Darren says, I would sound exactly like that too. I don't doubt it. I think you would. Take care.
Making your way with the nerds today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from hating JJ sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to just get laid? glad you came. You wanna be in a galaxy where Star Trek isn't lame. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Turds of a feather flock together, that's what we believe. We know a place that's got you covered, a place to get relief. Wouldn't you like to say me Pooh? Sometimes you wanna go where Turnistanies know your name, and all Kurogans are to blame. You wanna be where you can see Kuroga go up in flames. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! You son of a bitch, anti-tracker! You son of a bitch, anti-tracker. You